Zipper rolls out to the right, pitches off to Taylor, and Taylor's to the 20, down to the 15, down to the 10, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Touchdown, Billy Taylor! Touchdown, Billy Taylor! Billy Taylor scored a touchdown from 21 yards out. The crowd goes berserk. It was November 22nd, 1969. That they came to Barry, Michigan, all dressed in maize and blue. The words were said, the prayers were read, and everybody cried. But when they closed the coffin, there was someone else inside. Oh, they came to Barry, Michigan, but Michigan wasn't dead. And when the game was over, it was someone else instead. 11 Michigan Wolverines put on the gloves of gray, and as the organ played the victors, they laid Woody Hayes away. Under center is Wangler at the 45. He goes back. He's looking for a receiver. He throws downfield to Carter. Who's got it better than us? Nobody!
Welcome to the Michigan Man Podcast on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew, for Wolverine fans from coast to coast. Go Blue and welcome to the show. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. It's here, the game. I can't think of a day I look more forward to. My guest feels the same way. It's her favorite week of the year. We're both old school though, and we wish the game was played before Thanksgiving, but that's over with, never gonna happen again. The angel of the big house, beat writer Angelique Shengelis, joins us once again to preview the game. On Thursday, we'll be joined by the senior media guy covering Ohio State football, Tim May. He retired from the Columbus Dispatch after last season, sort of. He has his own podcast now, and he'll be with us to share his thoughts on this huge game on Saturday. Before we hear from Angelique, though, my view from Section 17 to start us off. I never thought I'd see Ohio State beat us 14 of 15 years. It is still just unimaginable it has reached this point. It has to change, though, some year, some Saturday. But is this the year? I'm not sure. We are playing our best football right now, and our offense is really hitting its stride under first-year OC Josh Gattis. Shea Patterson, even though many in our fan base have doubted him, has proven to be a gutsy leader, and I think he's a big-time player. The moment is not too big for Shea, and we, of course, need him to play out of his mind this Saturday. People ask me if this is the best Ohio State team I've ever seen, and I'm honest when I say no. When I was a kid, I thought the 1969 team was the best I'd ever seen play, and we know what happened in the Big House 50 years ago. Michigan rose up and took them down. This might be the best Ohio State team I've seen since. I'm withholding judgment until Saturday afternoon. I'm not sure we're going to see a repeat of that epic upset, but the stage is set, and as trite as this sounds, it is why we play the game. I don't care about their record, that the national media gets the vapors when they talk about Ohio State, or that they've beaten us 14 of 15 years. It's a new day. It's a new game. They're good, no doubt. Are they great? We'll see. I'm ready. Again, I'm not sure this is the year, but you know what? It can be. We can beat this team. We have to believe that and play out of our minds too. It is the game. There is no other matchup in sports that holds a candle to it, and I can't wait. My guest today says we would be silly to write Michigan off in this game. As good as Ohio State is, they have to come in here and earn it. The angel of the big house is up next here on the Michigan Man, in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew, so stay with us. here with us on our Michigan Game Day segment as we get ready for the game. And this is, believe it or not, the 9th time in the last 10 years. Angelique Shingelis from the Detroit News. Welcome back, Angelique.
I'd like to know, Mike, where was I on that one time I missed? What happened?
I remember it, and I know you do too. You were in that ice-cold Wisconsin press box there in Madison, and you lost your voice.
That's right, I did. That was just a couple years ago.
Yeah, just a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I was miserable. It was just a few years ago. I totally forgot about that, and I didn't want to suggest that you were, snubbing me. But that Monday after that game, I was trying to ask Harbaugh a question, and I was like talking like this, and he sort of like heard me, but he's like, "Well, is this what you're saying?" Like, yeah, it's really, maybe I think some of my colleagues probably would prefer me not having my voice. So, okay, I didn't mean to give you a hard time. I thought maybe you had just forgotten me one year, but it was me. 10 years of this. Wow, that's incredible. I'm honored. I'm always honored.
And here we go. And as you and I always say, it's our favorite week of the year for so many reasons. This is a huge game, and we're going to talk about that in just a minute. I wanted to back up, if we could, though, first, Angelique, and talk about what we saw on Saturday in Bloomington, get a few of your thoughts, because that Indiana game, it was a battle for, the better part of the first half. A lot of people thought it was going to be close all of the way. Indiana, gave us about a quarter and a half of really tough play, but again, we looked good on Saturday, I thought.
Yeah, I mean, the only takeaway I have, the one maybe a semi-negative, is I think you got to score points off of a turnover, and they had one in the first half, and came away with the Nordin field goal. I mean, in the second half, pardon me. And I think you got to get 7 there. And that was my only, if I was going to mark them down for anything, it would be that. But I think you can say, well, the running game's not there. The last 2 weeks they really haven't had the rushing yards like they had against Notre Dame and even at Maryland the next week. But then you look at what Shea Patterson's been doing, 9 touchdowns in the last 2 games, and looking like the guy that I think everybody expected he would be. And then you've got Nico Collins, that giant body with great hands. And everybody, I was flying back from Bloomington, and everybody's like, wow, I mean, didn't everybody know that he'd be a great target? And why don't they just throw it to him every time? And, that's not ideal either, but it was nice to see him being such an integral part of the offense, and should be, because of his size, his physicality, and his great hands. I mean, he got targeted 7 times. He got a pass interference. He had the 6 catches and the 3 touchdowns. That's hard to beat that kind of day.
Oh, absolutely. And, just getting back to that running game thing, the last 2 weeks, and that's what I was thinking at first. We got to establish the running game. But, in the last 3 or 4 years, we just kept pounding the ball in those situations, even if it didn't work. That's one of the things I think we have to give Josh Gattis credit for. If these defenses are going to just stack the box, we're going to throw the ball at them until they back off, and then you can balance out the running game, throw the bubble screens, just diversify your offense. That is a huge difference from the last couple of years. You're
right, and maybe that's, we're ingrained. We've watched his team just try to run up the middle when there's nothing there and try to get something, and then they don't get clever. They don't get interesting in their play calling, and this has been interesting the last couple of weeks. And you're right, give Josh Gattis, first-time play caller, first-time offensive coordinator, a lot of credit, Mike. And he has been calling interesting games, and it really goes hand in hand with the fact that they haven't turned over the ball. They really haven't. I mean, I was just looking back at the stats before that Penn State game. I remember I did a chart, and it was, they'd fumbled 17 times, lost 9, and was breaking down who had what. And there were 4 interceptions heading into that game, and then since then, that's 5 games, they've had 5 fumbles and only lost 1, and then there's been 2 interceptions. I mean, Shea had one against Indiana. So when you have that lack of turnovers, that really defined the early part of the season, Josh Gattis has been able to flex his muscles a little bit with his play calling and be creative. And there's just a rhythm there now and a comfort level, I think, for Shea Patterson, particularly these last couple games. And you're right. I mean, that's a great point about the run game. And, I think we just get so locked into, they're not running the ball. They're not getting 150 yards a game. And well, they don't have to, and getting the ball, getting touchdowns through the air is a really nice option. Yeah, I know we'll talk about Ohio State going forward here, but I do think they do have to find a little more balance. But for now, this seems to be working just fine for them.
Let's talk about Shea Patterson for a minute, because I really feel good for the kid. You go back to the beginning of the season, first 3 or 4 games, he was hurt. We knew that. We didn't know to what degree, I don't think. But I know, talking to fans, getting emails, it was, this Shea Patterson's not a 5-star. He's not an NFL quarterback, yada, yada, yada. But now, as Jim said, he's ascending. Jim likes that word. And
yes.
It's hard to pick apart his game right now. His leadership, the way he's throwing the ball, his presence on the field, he has just been outstanding, hasn't he?
He has. And he's just really gained confidence. And, I think that Jim was a little frustrated last week heading into this Indiana game when, people, the players have said it, Mike. It's not just us in the media saying, well, it's ever since that second half of the Penn State game. The players have said it, and Jim got a little irritated saying, well, look, I don't think there's one time. It's just been a gradual process. But I really think you can look at a different offense, and that goes back to a different Shea Patterson after that game. And, he almost led that comeback. They had a touchdown on the hands there that was dropped on 4th down. They had a chance to overcome a 21-0 deficit. And I think they got that, we can do it kind of confidence. And that comes from Shea Patterson. And, I think these last 2 games, certainly, I say that it has to give him a lot of confidence, and it does. And he carries himself the same way all the time, though, Mike. I mean, I've never seen him down. He's not like Eeyore, and he doesn't get overly up after a big performance. I mean, he's sitting there after the Indiana game, and even the week before after Michigan State, even though he'll say in the most monotone voice, that was the greatest game I've been part of, or I'm so happy to be part of it. You just don't get it. You don't really detect any range of emotion with him. But you do see that the players respect him, and they like being with him. They like playing for him and with him. And he may not be effusive in his enthusiasm and I did this today, but that's who he is. And so it's nice to see someone who is not about Shea Patterson getting this kind of success, going into the biggest game of the season now. And I mean, he's had 750 yards and 9 touchdowns in the last 2 games. That's pretty impressive, and has to give him all sorts of confidence going into this last one. And I did an interview with him last December when he said he was coming back to Michigan, and he said it was that game, that loss at Ohio State, that really stuck with him, and he didn't want to go out with that on his record, on his resume. And who knows what the outcome will be Saturday, but he wants another chance to write that. They're all feeding off of him. Oh,
absolutely. And he's playing his best ball right now, as we know. Over on the defensive side, though, I want to talk about that for a minute, Angelique. I thought IU had a good game plan on Saturday early, and then Don Brown made whatever adjustments he makes, and he's been doing that this year, where you see a couple of series from the opposition, they have success, and then kaboom, he makes some adjustments. The defense, I think, 280 yards total offense Indiana had, at least late, that's what they had. But again, another very, very solid performance from the D.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I looked at their numbers nationally, and I had the stats from after the Wisconsin game, when they gave up all the rushing yards, and they were ranked 47th nationally. They were giving up 343 yards a game. Now they're up to 4th and 267. And I think everybody remembers that performance that Jonathan Taylor had against Michigan. And Michigan comes out of that game after 3 games, ranked 114th against the run. Now they're up to 13th. And they have just shut things down. They're not letting people do what they want to do. Yes, there's some wiggle room early. Michigan State scored first. Indiana obviously moved the ball. And then they've made adjustments. And, talking to different people, coaches, people who have prepared for Michigan, what they have told me is that, the personnel, maybe the defensive personnel is good. It's not what it has been the last couple of years that Don Brown's worked with, but he has done more. And I don't want to say more with less, because I don't mean to disparage the talent at all. What I've been told is that he he's just schemed more. He's made it more diverse, obviously more zone, and he learned from that Ohio State game last year. When everyone's saying, "Well, is he going to be stubborn and not change?" Well, he did change. He didn't go, full bore one way or the other, but he incorporated. And I think that's what offensive coordinators are seeing now, is that there's more to this Michigan defense. Maybe the personnel across the board isn't as good. You don't have a Devin Bush yet. You don't have Rashawn Gary, Chase Winovich yet, but you have some pretty good players and a pretty good defensive mind that's making it tougher for them because he's scheming differently.
No, absolutely. I mean, I'm a huge Don Brown fan. Love what he's done ever since he's been here. But I think that's the schematic changes this year. That's very true. Brian Kelly talked about that a couple of weeks ago. He said Ian Book, and he said the entire offense was very, very confused by that zone package Michigan was using on them because they wanted to hit that defense with the crossing routes, which really haven't been working this year because of those changes. And Urban Meyer, of all people, mentioned that yesterday also. He said those zone packages have taken away a lot of what hurt that defense last year.
Absolutely. And, I think, Don Brown, I think it's tired of hearing the armchair quarterbacks. I think who called it yesterday the couch quarterbacks. One of the players called them couch quarterbacks. Or couch coaches, couch coaches. And, he hears the stuff. I mean, he hears people criticizing him for not being willing to change and just sticking with what he wants all the time without really thinking about options. And I don't think he took that to heart. I think he knew. I mean, he saw what happened in Columbus last year. And like you said, Mike, I mean, you're a big fan of his. He's a smart guy, and he's considered that across the country as one of the top defensive minds. And, I think that was a wake-up call, certainly. And, you can say the bowl game, too, but I always sort of write off the bowl game. I think we talked about that earlier in the year. I mean, I just don't think that's a fair assessment with players missing. But that Ohio State game gave them a blueprint for what they needed to do. I mean, obviously, Ohio State saw what Indiana had done the week before, and even looking at that first half that Northwestern had against Michigan last year, they saw what was effective against this defense, and Don Brown learned. And the good coaches, though, I'm sure Ohio State has a wrinkle, something that they're going to try to attack Michigan's defense. And you think that Don Brown's got a lot up his sleeve too. He's had a lot of time to think about that game last year, kind of like the Penn State game from a couple of years ago that kept him up every night, or he woke up thinking about it. So I'm sure he's had the same thing with that Ohio State game from last year.
Well, here with us on our Game Day segment as we get ready for the game, Angelique Schengellers from the Detroit News. So let's talk about what's going to happen this Saturday, Angelique, the game. I've actually seen quite a bit of Ohio State this year, and they're scary. I mean, very impressive until Saturday. They almost looked human against Penn State. Yes, they had turnovers, but they were finally tested by a pretty good team. Whatever you think about Penn State, they are a solid team.
They are a solid team. And, James Franklin had them ready to go in Columbus, and I saw part of that game. And, but, I don't think we can gloss over those turnovers. Those are critical. I mean, Look how much they affected Michigan earlier this year. And, that's why I look at this team and think, well, if it's a close game on Saturday, that's when the turnovers become so key. And, maybe Michigan gets a turnover and pounces on it and gets that lead or extends a lead against Ohio State. And that's, it's hard to find an Achilles heel with this team. I mean, you just look at they've got J.K. Dobbins. I mean, they got Justin Fields who's playing great. I mean, he's almost 70% of his passes. He's 33 touchdowns, and KJ Hill and Olave. I mean, I've been talking to a bunch of former Michigan players, and about the frustration of not beating this team for such a long stretch. And it's like, they lose one guy, and they've got another All-American stepping in and filling that void. And that's kudos to their recruiting and the efforts that they've made to really have such a deep team personnel wise, but they did look human on Saturday, and will they be human on this Saturday? I mean, time will tell, obviously, but people say, well, they won't be motivated. They've already lost up a Big Ten championship berth, but I just think Ryan Day gets it too. I mean, he knows. He had a predecessor in Urban Meyer, who knew what this rivalry was all about, and I think Ryan Day has absorbed that, and I would imagine they'll be coming out, really fired up in Ann Arbor on Saturday.
Until Saturday, though, this past Saturday, I thought this Buckeye team was just unbeatable. There was just no question about it. And they still might be. I think a lot of those unforced errors, those turnovers really hurt them, but you can clean that up, I think. I can still see Michigan now because of what we've seen since, as we mentioned, halftime or the second half of the Penn State game. I can still see them giving Ohio State a game on Saturday.
Oh, I can too. I just think for Michigan, the margin of error is zero.
Yeah,
I mean, it's really slim. They can't get behind. I mean, they can't do have a deficit like they had on the road both times at Wisconsin and Penn State. And here's Aiden Hutchinson saying something similar to what you just said, Mike. That they're not unbeatable. Everybody can they can beat anybody. And that Michigan can. And, he was saying that they don't panic. If they give up a score like they did in Michigan State, Indiana, they don't panic, this defense. But I think it's going to be a little bit more of a challenge against Ohio State just because of the machine it is. And, this is, their first, first scoring offense, number one, for almost 50 points a game. I mean, they've just got so many different weapons. And but I totally agree with you. And sometimes you wonder if it's just the people you're flying back with from a game. And there's a lot of Michigan fans who feel really confident, but it's quiet confidence. I feel like I don't think anyone's saying they're going to win, but I think they're saying it could be competitive, and that's where like a turnover, kicking game comes in and really becomes the moment that decides the game. It'll be interesting because you look back at last year and that game was competitive through the first half, I think, right? I mean,
right.
And you think 39 points would be enough to beat anybody, and Ohio State just had more. So I agree with you. I do think that I would not write Michigan off in this game at all.
No, you're right. They have a zero margin for error, though, in this game. And the one thing I know Jim will preach this all week, they have got to get out there and get a fast start. You do not want to play from behind against this team.
Absolutely not. I mean, that's critical, especially in your home stadium, and get the crowd in it. You don't want a deflated Michigan Stadium crowd because that's just not going to carry this team. And not that this team needs that, but certainly what a boost it is for these players when they're playing at home. And Shea Patterson's got that record at home. He doesn't want to see that blemished. And you're absolutely right. They just cannot get in a hole because they almost did it at Penn State on the road in a whiteout. That was really something else. But this again is a different beast. Ohio State is just a different team and a different animal than Wisconsin or Penn State.
No, absolutely, whole different kind of an animal, as you said. And I thought it was interesting on Saturday's TV coverage. Todd Blackledge was asked does Michigan athletically match up with Ohio State, and right away I said no, not right now, we don't. But he said there's no doubt in his mind Michigan does match up. Again, he pointed out what you said. There is no margin for error, but athletically this team is pretty close to matching up. Do you think that's true?
I think it's close. I mean, I think Ohio State still has the advantage personnel-wise, and I hate saying that because it sounds like I'm saying I don't think Michigan has great talent. I really do. I think that you look at these receivers. I mean, these freshmen, these young guys, I think are something else. And I just love their attitude and the way they approach the game and how much fun they're having playing. But I like the running backs. I like Haskins. I like Charbonnet. Is there a guy? I'm still like someone who likes to have a premier back. Is there a J.K. Dobbins? I don't think so, but they're close. They've got two guys who are really good, but they do. They have I've always thought Shea Patterson's a very, very capable quarterback. I'm not ready to crown Justin Fields king of the quarterbacks on Saturday.
That Ohio State defense, though, Angelique, when you look at it, it's just so loaded up, especially in the secondary. But when I watched Saturday, Penn State moved the ball on them on the road with a backup center and a backup quarterback. So, I'm starting to think that this Michigan offense really can have success I don't know if it'll be sustained, but they're going to be able to they're going to have their chances against this defense.
I think so too. And I was just looking at the stats. I mean, Ohio State has 14 interceptions this year. That's pretty good. And if they can neutralize Chase Young somehow, I mean, that would be pretty critical. I mean, he's had almost 20 tackles for loss this year. And, I mean, he's such a dominating force, 16.5 sacks. I mean, he's crazy good, as everybody knows. That's not there's no breaking news there. But you're right. I mean, I think that Penn State showed that. I think they had just under 100 yards rushing. So I don't think you don't have to have just this crazy rushing game to have a chance against Ohio State's defense. But I do think that the way Michigan's offense is running right now and using those receivers, I think Nico Collins has to have a huge game. You have to use him a lot. He's their big body guy, and Peoples-Jones too. These guys have to be very active in the offense. And I think the other thing you're seeing where Michigan's improved a lot is the blocking. I mean, the receivers are blocking harder. The tight ends are. I mean, you've really seen it across the board that they've picked it up, that they're all doing their jobs. And that's really, I think, made them more effective on offense, Mike. And I think they have to be able to sustain that against this defense.
Absolutely, and that's why I think the key matchup in this game Saturday, when Michigan has the ball, is Michigan's receiving core against that incredible secondary for Ohio State. And then I know that sounds wacky. I don't know, though, that Ohio State has seen this many talented receivers on the field against them.
No, you're absolutely right about that. And that's the beauty of this. You know, they do have just so many different types of receivers, and they can do different things. And I mean, you look at Giles Jackson. That guy is he moves and he's tough to bring down. And Ronnie Bell is Ronnie Bell. I mean, what a season he's had, and he finally got in the end zone on Saturday. But all these guys, they really and Shea's been moving the ball around a lot too. Nine different receivers on Saturday against Indiana, so he's got the options, and he knows he does. And he's been getting time. He's been the offensive line has really been giving him some protection. So I agree with you. I think it's how that matchup goes with the Ohio State secondary. But to me, it all starts again up front with this Michigan offensive line, and how much time are you going to give Shea to find these guys and to give them a chance to make those plays against this defense?
That is going to be a huge question. We, of course, will see that answered on Saturday. The other question is over on that defensive side of the ball. Don Brown and his staff so embarrassed after what happened last year, and he would like nothing better than to get a semblance of revenge. And I don't know, how you can. I don't think the Michigan defense or anyone can stop Ohio State, but you have to slow them down, and that means making Justin Fields uncomfortable. And again, with Michigan's speed, I think that is very plausible.
I do too. I mean, I really do, and I agree with that. And you got a guy like Mike Dana who's been rotating in a lot. I mean, they've been rotating players, and I think the other thing we haven't talked about yet is this element now with Greg Madison on the other sideline, and how motivated these defensive linemen, the guys he coached and recruited to Michigan, are. And I talked to Chris Hutchinson a few weeks ago, the great Michigan All-American defensive lineman whose son is starting defensive end, Aiden. Yeah. And he was saying, when he played, he wasn't this fiery guy like Aiden is. I mean, you just see Aiden, and he's just like always emotional. And, I hope these guys can scale it back a little bit. He goes, they're going to be so fired up to see Greg Madison. And Chris said he's hoping that Aiden, or he sort of suspects that Aiden will make a big play and then just go racing over to the Ohio State sideline to get in Greg's face. You got to be able to. That's great emotion to have, but you got to scale it back a little bit, because that's not the game. I mean, it's not proving something to Greg Madison. But I do think that's going to be an interesting element to this game, and how those players react, and how much more fire they're going to come out with, because I really do think they're going to feed off of that. I think Chris Partridge, the same thing. He talked about being, his mouth bloodied and the blood's still in their mouths from last year, and even Jim Harbaugh saying, "Hey, we're not, maybe after I'm retired, I'll send to Greg Madison a Christmas card again," but that's not happening anytime soon. So I think there's going to be that element too, and how this Michigan defense at least prepares this week. I know we talk about locker room. I mean, bulletin board material, and really that doesn't play into the game, but it plays into how you prepare.
Right.
And I think that they'll get them motivated. But you are right. Going back to your original point, Ohio State has a lot of weapons, and it's just about slowing. I think it is going to be hard to stop individuals like Dobbins and Justin Fields, but I think they've got the kind of guys, the pass rushers who can do that. And I also think Cam McGrone going to have a big game. I really think he's going to be an integral part in what happens on Saturday too. I really like the way he plays, and he's been a little bit more kind of behind the scenes the last couple weeks. We haven't talked much about him, but I just suspect he'll have a big game.
Well, as we know, in the game, the biggest rivalry in college football, maybe even in sports, I would say in sports, other people will disagree with that, but it means, I think, so much more to Michigan right now, after the way it's gone 14 of the last 15 years. And when you listen to Jim Harbaugh talk about it, I don't sense that he's stressed out or anxious about what's happening, but at least publicly. But I would think he has got to be churning inside after what's happened for the last 4 years. How much pressure is on Jim Harbaugh, do you think, this week?
I think there is. I mean, I think there's been pressure on him all season, and he's delivered in these rivalry games so far. I mean, they played 2, and I kept saying going in, if they could get 2 out of 3 rivalry games after those initial losses, I thought that would be a really good season. And now they've won 2. I mean, they want to get that third one, and because it'll take so much pressure off of them. And these guys are. Here's again, I keep mentioning Aiden Hutchinson. He's a guy who grew up here. He grew up in this, being a Michigan fan from the time he was an infant, and he hasn't seen success against their rivals. They need to. You talk to all these players. Once you need to win once just to get that to remember what it's like, and then it becomes contagious. And then it's it doesn't mean they're going to win next year, but it kind of gets them thinking that this can snowball and they can do more, and they can win again and again, and because this is cyclical. And I know people don't want to, think that that's the case, but John Cooper was 2-10-1 against Michigan, and then Tressel came in and kind of changed the cycle again. So I do think that there's a lot of pressure on Jim Harbaugh. There's a lot of pressure on these players. They want to get that pressure off the program. And 7 straight, you got Urban Meyer on TV now, and he tweets every day, every week about 7-0, 8-0, 9-0, and that's all he has to say. And but this week he's going to be saying 7-0 because that's what he did. And with Michigan, and I think that I think you're right. Jim Harbaugh is not going to flinch this week. He's not going to be emotional. He never is. But I suspect behind the scenes he is with the players, and I think that they all know that they've been preparing for this in some way every week. They didn't want to talk about it earlier this season, but it's not like this doesn't mean everything to them, because it does, and that's a lot of pressure for anybody.
Well, final question for you, Angelique. 50 years ago, Michigan took down what most observers thought was the best Ohio State team ever. An unbeatable team, a team I remember reading back then in the 60s that most NFL teams would have a hard time beating that Ohio State team. So this Ohio State team might not be that good, but a Michigan win on Saturday would rank right up there with beating the Bucs 50 years ago. Would you agree with that?
I do. And talking to a lot of those guys who were on that 69 team, I mean, what they believe ultimately is that win put Michigan back.
Yes.
I mean, it started this modern era of Michigan football and the 10-year war and everything that we all know about. And I think that they are intrigued by the similarities. I mean, I think they had a big win against Iowa going into their Ohio State game, and they were fired up right after the game. They all said if they could have played Ohio State an hour later, they would have been dressed and ready to get back on the field and go play then. And I think they see this sort of similar. They had lost to Michigan State that season, and obviously Michigan won that game this year. But having a pretty nice win the week before against Indiana, and you saw some of those guys being a little fiery. Again, Aiden Hutchinson being one of them, and Shea in his very low key way being fired up about playing this team. But yeah, I mean, maybe this does start the next cycle, and maybe Michigan does become more dominant and not more dominant, but dominant in the series, because they haven't been. And I look back at those Cooper teams too, Mike. I mean, those were great Ohio State teams. Those were some outstanding teams that Michigan beat, ruined their season, and this could be the start of something like that. And it's easy to draw a lot of comparisons to that game 50 years ago, and they're going to be honored. They'll be the honorary captains on Saturday, and they're having a reunion weekend. And you ask all those guys, they want to see. They would like nothing more than to cap off their reunion win with a win over Ohio State. And, the truth is that's what every Michigan fan wants to see right now, every former player. And, it really, when you talk to them at their core, it disgusts them that they've had this downturn in the rivalry. And they want to get back on that winning side for obvious reasons, and so do the fans. And, there is a lot of pressure. There's a lot of pressure on Jim Harbaugh and these players, but that's why they play at Michigan, right? That's what they always say. So it's time to try to get it done again.
Oh, absolutely. And I think a lot of fans are cynical because 1969, 50 years ago, a lot of the fan base was just not around, so they think, right. I mean, okay, one time it was a big win, but it did change the Michigan football for decades with that win. And those of us who were around then remember that no one gave Michigan a chance in that game. Absolutely no one. And in this game, a rivalry game, a superhuman effort can get the job done and change things. And that really, at this point, is what Michigan needs to do. It's got to be an elevated effort like we haven't seen. No turnovers, but it is possible.
It is possible. And you think back to, like, in the spring, what did Bo do going into that first season? They taped the score from the previous, the beatdown that Ohio State had given Michigan in 68. They had that tape that it was everywhere, 50. It was what Ohio State had scored. And it was everywhere. These players couldn't escape that. They were embarrassed. And I was talking to a couple of guys who were on the freshman team in 68, and they saw that, and they looked at each other and they said, okay, this is not happening ever again. And then you fast forward to this year, 2019, in the spring, Jim Harbaugh gets these T-shirts made with the 3 losses from last year, with the scores. And I remember Ben Bredesen said, he already knew what the scores were. He threw that T-shirt in the bottom of his locker. Sean McCune said he kept that shirt up and he had it hanging in the tight ends room. So, here's Harbaugh already from the spring trying different motivational tactics, and who knows what else he's done. These guys are being tight-lipped about it, and they were in July at the Big Ten Media Days, and they just assured that, people might think that they don't talk about Ohio State all the time, but they do. They're just not sharing it like the Ohio State players do, and like Urban Meyer did. And it doesn't mean they don't care as much. It's just that they want to keep it in-house, and I totally respect that. But, those motivational tactics are great during practices. And do they play a role in the game? Maybe. But, you talk to all these players on that 69 team, they all said they didn't go in saying they were going to beat Ohio State, but they knew they could play with Ohio State because Bo had convinced them that they could play, that they'd done everything to prepare and prepared as hard as Ohio State had, and they believed that. And look what happened. It really is still stunning to see, Mandich being carried off and looking exhausted and just seeing their faces 50 years later. It's still a pretty remarkable moment in time. And these guys of the 2019 version would love to have that moment too.
Absolutely. It was a huge, huge moment for Michigan football. And this team will get their chance for another moment like that this Saturday. So we shall see. With us on our game day segment this week as we get ready for the game and everything that goes with it this week is beat writer Angelique Shengelis from the Detroit News. And as we mentioned at the top, this is the 9th time in the last 10 years that you've joined us on our preview show, Angelique, and always a pleasure to have you. And we hope you have a wonderful Thanksgiving with your family, and it's going to be a great week, and we look forward to your next visit.
Oh, Mike, thank you, and happy Thanksgiving. And it's going to be a great crowd, I'm sure, on Saturday. And I apologize for thinking you snubbed me the one year. I totally forgot I was on the DL that year. I apologize. I knew that you hadn't forgotten me one year.
No.
It is our favorite week, so I'm glad we get to share that.
Well, again, it's been a pleasure as always, Angelique, and we look forward to our next visit.
Thanks so much.
Quick Hits is next as we wrap it up for another week here on The Michigan Man on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew.
On Quick Hits today, Brad Hawkins seems to be the only injury concern for this Saturday. Jim said he just doesn't know if he will be cleared to play. Other than that, as we've said the last few weeks, we are in great shape. There will be much written and said in the media this week about how Ohio State has dominated us over the last 15 years. Always remember, we hold the advantage in this series from a win-loss perspective. Yes, it has to change, and we as a program have to make it change. Will we get the monkey off our backs this Saturday and turn the tide in this series? Not many people think so, if we're being honest, and most of our fan base probably doesn't think so either. It only matters what the guys in the locker room think, though. It's time. I know they feel that way. They just have to go out on Saturday and play out of their minds and do it. It should be an incredible atmosphere. It always is in the game. On Thursday's Visitors Edition, we will once again be joined by Tim May, longtime beat writer from the Columbus Dispatch, and now the host of his very own podcast. So even though it's a busy Thanksgiving day, please remember to join us. That will do it for our game day show. In case you missed the Thursday program, let me wish each and every one of you a very happy Thanksgiving. Enjoy the day with family and friends, watching the Lions lose again because you know they will, and be safe. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Until Thursday, take care, and as always, go blue.
Thanks for joining us today on The Michigan Man, here on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew. Our listener lines are open 24/7 for your calls at 313-263-4842. That's 313-263-4842. Or email us at themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. That's themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. The Michigan Man Podcast is produced at the studios of Robin Lynn Productions, Allen Park, Michigan, and is not affiliated with the University of Michigan. Go Blue!